Welcome to another AUG blog audio post located at augforums.com. That's augforums.com. You can find this specific audio post at augforums.com/audio post 13. That's audio post and the number 13. This is your host, Tim Rodman, coming to you live on Saturday, April 4th, 2020 from Columbus, Ohio. And in this audio post, we're talking with Ryan Brown by phone call. And Ryan, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Ryan Brown. I'm CEO of Acumatica Technologies. I didn't know this ahead of time, but apparently I'm lucky number 13 on the audio post. So it's some good news.
Yeah, I think we need all the luck we can get these days, huh?
Yeah, and I'm coming from you in the new home office in Florida. So, like everyone, we're sitting at home. We're part teachers, part workers, part everything nowadays. So it's fun times. So.
Yeah, I think the silver lining is the extra family time, the time with the kids if you have kids. But of course, it's difficult at the same time for sure.
Yeah, the family time with kids is really great. I used to work from home back a few years ago, and when kids were younger, and I know for lunch, this is back when I had a basement. Florida, we have water for basements, I got to go upstairs whenever it was lunchtime and have lunch with the family. Have lunch with my daughter, and that's awesome. So now get to do it at least as a trial for the next month.
At least for now, for the foreseeable future, right?
Yeah. We'll get out of it though.
Well, tell us a little bit about what XByte does, and I'll put a link to XByte's website in this audio post. But tell us a little bit about what your business does, and if you can, share like a ballpark annual revenue and number of employees so people get an idea of how big you are.
Okay. Yeah. We're roughly $30 million in sales. We have 50 employees. Although we're located in Florida, that's our headquarters. We do have people located in Ohio, in Oklahoma. So we're spread out throughout the country a little bit, but we do business all over the world. So it just happens to be the shipping headquarters is in Florida. So we don't have snow days. So it's nice in the wintertime. No one has an excuse that I couldn't get my car to work because of the snow. Occasional hurricane, but once you get to live in Florida, they're not that big a deal. They're this little deals. XByte, we're funny. We're a provider of IT gear, real physical servers. So it's always funny to talk about a cloud platform when you specialize in physical servers. I always get a chuckle out of that.
That's a good point.
We help businesses get the most out of their IT budget. So if it is cloud, it's great. And one of the things that actually drove us to Acumatica that made sense to us in our whole way of doing business is the fact that it's cloud, but it doesn't have to be public cloud. So we run it in our own private cloud. For our purposes, we have it at our physical location on one of our servers. As you can imagine, we sell a bunch of servers and we get good prices. So we have it on our own servers in our local facility, but we also have a backup at a data center. So we know if anything were to ever happen to our facility, we do have that backup, and with Acumatica, you can kind of turn it on, or actually for us, we just turn it on automatically, and we wouldn't skip a beat. It'd just be like if we're back in our office. But so back to what XByte does is we help companies maximize their IT budget, and we really specialize on the Dell side of things. And we have access to new servers, refurbished stuff, used equipment, and we get in with customers, have great conversations with them about what they need and what makes sense, and we can deliver any of that to them. So I'll give you a story where it makes sense. We're dealing with a regional hospital, And we were actually at a charity event, talked to them, and we got in the door. And at first we started on the refurbish side of things. And we were doing some service for them. And then we started talking to them, okay, what else do you do? We got into working with the new stuff. And now we have strategic meetings with them where we say, okay, what in your facility needs to be brand new for whatever reason? And maybe it's compliance issues or whatever it is. Sometimes companies they have to have line of sight on where goods were produced. So we sit with them on a strategic level every year and figure out where their budgets can be spent. And it can be refurbished, it can be used, it can be new, and we work with them on all of that and really allow them to kind of figure out, okay, we're going to get the most out of things and hopefully bring some projects earlier that they now have more budget for.
Yeah, what drew you to Acumatica is actually one of the things that drew me to Acumatica. As much as the cloud is such a trendy thing these days, it really seems like a pendulum. I mean, if you go back to 60s, 70s, 1960s, 1970s, this whole centralized versus decentralized, it's just a pendulum that swings back and forth, right? So as much as the public cloud is such a big deal right now, you give it 10, 15 years, and I think it's going to swing back to, maybe you'll call it private clouds being more popular, right? So it makes sense that you have the option with Acumatica. It's an attractive thing about it to be able to deploy in their public cloud or your own private cloud or on-prem. It's flexible. I really like that. That was a big point for me when I was looking at it originally.
Yeah, and being the fact that it's still cloud, you have all these. Even if you do a real private cloud, you have all the other hooks that can hook into it because of the fact it's written as a cloud platform. So all these open APIs that you can access to just work with other systems because it is natively a cloud app.
What about your role at the company? Like what your role when you started, how long you've been there, and your role now at X-Pipe?
Yeah, so I've been at the company, almost 11 years now. Started just doing marketing, then got into doing the sales and marketing roles. And it was about 3-4 years ago, and I think that's now 4 years ago, that they asked me to kind of take on the CEO role. And at a small business, titles are, you kind of do what you need to do. For us, I work on some of the corporate strategy, like using Acumatica as a tool for us. Also still working with the marketing teams and also our development teams as we work with software.
So how soon after, or I guess I should ask this way, what year did you implement Acumatica, and how high on the list was that when you stepped into that CEO role of being one of those top? Was it a top strategic thing, or did you have some other things to get through first?
For us, we were running Everest before, and they really were not innovating at all or really building on it. And so the version that we were on, we know is on a version of Windows that's not going to be supported anymore. So we had to make the move, and so we looked at a lot of things, and we came across Acumatica, and went into that. The key thing with us is again looking at Everest. We wanted flexibility and looking at a company that really wanted to grow and do things. It was interesting, kind of looking at Acumatica and saying, okay, look, the people who are joining the team, they had looked at it and said, look, a lot of people who are on the Acumatica team, they could have gone anywhere, but they chose Acumatica. And looking at the key people within executive roles at Acumatica, you really get a sense that, okay, these people are committed, and they've taken other companies to great heights. And so that was one of the reasons why in the beginning, along with all the features, that we wanted to go with Acumatica.
And being a former Everest customer, there's actually a number of people at Acumatica who came from Everest, including Ali Johnny, who, do you know, did he used to own Everest, or he was definitely a key player there, right?
Yeah, he was one of the founders of Everest. I was also actually an Everest employee, so I worked actually.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So I knew Ali, Sean, a lot of the gang, from the Everest days. So I know all of them. And having the background in software definitely did not hurt. Being able to kind of help guide where we're going to go with our software decisions, and even during the implementation, I think having senior support of any new implementation is one of the best things you can do, because then people aren't like, okay, yeah, if it's going to be short-lived, it's really not going to go anywhere. If on top is pushing it and pushing the use of it and adoption of it, it really helps.
Yeah, that's huge. That executive sponsorship of the implementation is so critical, because there's always going to be bumps, right? And you need to be committed to it to get through it, for sure. I guess being the CEO, that was easy for you, huh? To be able to get that executive sponsorship.
Yeah, you still had to get buy-in from all the managers of the departments, and that's ongoing. I mean, there are bumps. There were bumps in the beginning. Even back in the Everest days, we had people who always want to go back to QuickBooks. Just some people love systems, and then going to and it's funny. As soon as you go to a system, suddenly your old system was like the best thing ever. So
that's so true.
We went to Everest. All of a sudden, QuickBooks was amazing. I'm like, really? I'm like, you guys remember all the stuff they couldn't do? And then as soon as we go to Acumatica, they're like, oh man, Everest didn't do this. I'm like, it did worse. I'm like, it's like, really? I'm like, it's a magical system that did everything for us, that everyone had to move, everyone wanted to move off of. But yeah, it is amusing how rose-colored glasses people get in looking at former systems.
The grass is always greener, and change is always painful, right?
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So if you can remember, about what month and year did you start your implementation? About what month and year did you finish? And what advice would you give someone who's in the middle of implementing Acumatica?
We had a very unique implementation. So you may want to get your cup of coffee on this one. But yeah. So
yeah, bring it up. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I know we went live in July of 2017, and I believe it was a 2-year implementation or longer. So it could have been 2.5 years. We started with, I don't want to name any names here, but we started with one partner. And getting into it, they very customization happy with us. We got it. We were going down the road. Anything we want to do, they just say, oh, sure, we'll customize. At that time, we didn't really know standards of Acumatica for customizations, but they did a lot of customizations just going directly to SQL, the database. And we've learned since then that's a bad idea. But we'd go through with them, and at the time, we had thought that we wanted someone local was like the key piece of how to do a great implementation. So we found someone in Florida that worked for us, and but they didn't necessarily know the business process side of things, how to do like the distribution, stuff like that. They were much more on the services side of things, and we're much more on the product side. So as we're going through things, we ended up going through with them, and it just didn't end up working for us with them as a partner. We saw some of that. We're going to go live. We're like, oh, let's just go live. And actually, in the 11th hour, I think it was like the weekend before going live, we were doing final system checks, just checking everything. And we deal with a lot of serial numbers, so user-defined serial numbers. And we found an issue with how Acumatica handled pick tickets. And the weekend before go live, I think it was like that Friday, found this, got on the phone with Acumatica, discovered, it is just a way they handle things. you can call it a bug or what you want to call it, but the way they handled the user-defined serial numbers wouldn't work for us at all. So we actually had to stop go live that weekend and push it out a few months. So we pushed it out, started with a partner again a little bit.
Can you tell us, for people who are heavy into serial numbers, do you remember what the specific issue was?
It's since been fixed, and it had to do with how.
Oh, never mind that. If it's been fixed, never mind. I wasn't sure if it was more of a process thing or more of a buggy thing. Sounds like it really was more of a buggy thing.
No,
That's
it's
okay.
more of a buggy thing. Yeah,
okay.
It had to do with committing of serial numbers. As crazy as we found in Acumatica in general, the serial numbers we found it happens for whatever reason is like the last thing they kind of bring into solutions. So if you are dealing with serial numbers, realize that we did see that with some of the innovations with the scanning that they've done. The user-defined serial numbers happen to be the last thing that they added to that ability. But anyway, back with partner, working with them, then they were purchased by somebody. We're like, okay, look, the new company, let's talk to them. We ended up just personalities weren't working. We couldn't make things work. So we ended up having to switch off. And in Acumatica, they wanted us because of the experience of the partner. They're like, look, we can't have you guys go through this again. We want to take this on, and they actually ended up reviewing all of our customizations. And when they looked at it, they saw all the SQL code in there, and they realized that hey, none of these we can't actually support any of this because we know that the experience will be terrible for you. So we ended up having the Acumatica. They ended up rewriting all the customizations we had. But the great thing is that when we went to do that, they helped us to look at everything and say, hey, look, you guys don't need these customizations. The software can already do these things. And they pushed us to kind of reinvent and analyze our stuff. And so we ended up cutting out a lot of the customizations because it was just like, look, the software can get you 95% of the way. Do you really need the extra 5% of the customizations, or can you just change what you do a little bit and kind of work within the software? And so we started doing much more of that and really realized that Acumatica did have a lot of good processes built into it. We'd done it our way for years, and at the time weren't necessarily open or didn't have a partner that was guiding us to do some of that, to kind of look more at our processes than they're very customization friendly. So
I think you make a really interesting point there in that if you look at an ERP implementation as being maybe two hands or maybe the yin and yang, one side of it is technical, another side of it is more of an art. It's related to business process reengineering. And I think you make an interesting point that when you're choosing a partner, it might be wise to assess which one of those hands you are. Are you more technical? I think Xbyte is more on the technical side. Or are you less technical and more process-oriented internally? And then you select a partner that is the opposite so that you have those two strengths going through an implementation. You think that would be wise advice?
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, 150%. So when we ended up selecting a partner to go with after a go live, that was a major. You hit right there. We brought in a partner of ours, or we were talking to partners, trying to pick the right one to go with. The ones who knew the process, or the one that knew the process the best for us, is the one we picked. And while we do a lot of stuff that's self-sufficient now, we do lean on them for things like, hey, this process is going wrong, and helping us through some of that piece of it, which is more the Acumatica side of things, not necessarily the customization side of things. So it's a great, as you said, the great yin yang.
So they gave you that independent perspective to ask those questions that you just can't. You need a second perspective, right? That's definitely a big thing a consultant brings to the table.
Yeah,
I like that point.
Yeah, the other perspective and to push you to say, hey, look, do you really need this? Like before you just say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, let's look at that process. And so we've seen that both with Acumatica and most of the good partners. We've our current one and other partners we just talked to being part of the Acumatica community.
Yeah, I've actually seen someone implement Acumatica, and they insisted that all their old green screen style reports needed to look exactly the same in the system. And so they spent a ton of time customizing all the reports to look like the old reports. Needless to say, it didn't turn out well. So having someone who's daring enough to push back on your quote demands, I agree. That's important to have.
Yeah, and I will tell you that with especially with Acumatica pushing us to use their standards, and then anyone who's done any special products for us over the years, we pushed on them to do Acumatica standards as well, and even stuff that we do on our own. It's made upgrades so easy. Our first upgrade, and Acumatica did all of our customizations in the beginning, so our partner didn't know them, and they looked at it and they said, "Hey, look, we have no idea how this is going to turn out because we didn't do your customization." So they said, "Hey, look, let's just do the upgrade. Why don't you guys try it? See how it works. If everything's broken, we have a lot of hours we can bank up to try and fix stuff for you. Let's just see what happens." And we did a test run, and it literally took us about an hour and a half to upgrade all the customizations. It was
wow.
It was and it was so smooth. I think we had a certain function call that changed a little bit, so we had to add a variable to it, and then upgrading some DLLs to newer versions, and that was the extent of our upgrade process. And we've gone through 2 upgrades, and we're about ready to do our 3rd upgrade, and we've seen the same thing every time. Extremely little time to upgrade between versions. So one of the amazingly impressive things with this, or with old systems, upgrades, you kind of cross your fingers every time. They didn't have the same standards, so things would just break because I remember being part of Everest, and we had to actually publish exactly all the tables that changed because most customizations just relied heavily on SQL, and so if you change the table structure, you broke all these customizations. So it's really nice to see the fact that it was so easy for us to do these upgrades.
And that's why that middle layer that Acumatica has, which I believe is BQL, that translates to the SQL, is important, so that when things change, it's less likely to break, and why originally it wasn't good that you were customizing directly to the SQL.
Correct. Yeah, that middle layer and the Acumatica objects, they do some of the calculations for you on things, so you don't have to worry about some of the SQL connections. It's really nice to if you're trying to go from sales orders to the addresses, you don't have to figure out some of the logic yourself. It does some of that logic, the connection to get to that data you need.
So a couple of hours to upgrade, that's significant, I think, especially because even though it sounds like you did eliminate some of your customizations, you still have a handful at least. It's not just like you changed a label on a field. You did some substantial stuff, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah. So I think with the first partner, we had, 25 different customizations. We were actually able to get that down to, 8 or 9 in the beginning. They did different things. Some of it just were custom processes. We do things where we will inventory things in specific part numbers, but when people order stuff, they don't necessarily care which part they get. You can imagine if you have a hard drive of a certain size, let's say 1 terabyte hard drive, you can only take any 1 terabyte hard drive you need. You don't necessarily care which one you get. So we have people order a generic off the web, and then what we say is we flush it out to the specific once the order comes into our system. So we had to build that logic into Acumatica to handle that substitution process. So that was a key piece for us. We've done custom workflows. So when we have our sales team, when they go to save a sales order, if anything that we deem inappropriate happens, they can get pinged. So we have certain products that can't be sold together. It checks for that. We have certain warranties that can't be given on certain types of products based on, let's say, how old a product is. It can't be under certain warranty types, so we check for all that. We have certain pricing that it monitors as well. So those pieces, which we just couldn't configure.
I'm curious on that. The piece that checks for stuff, does it actually stop them from saving the sales order, or does it just give them a notification to go and fix it later?
It does stop them from saving it. So we would stop the process and to make them think a little bit about what the error is. It's not just a warning, hey, click OK to that you can't save. We have them actually type in a password. We have some conditions where we still want to allow them to save, but because they just need to kind of continue doing some stuff, and it's okay without that warning message. So we have certain things that some of our warranties. Well, yes, it can't be on most products under a certain condition. There are some exceptions to that. So the sales team knows those exceptions. We try and code enough of those so they don't have to override it too much, but they do know the override code. So we have specific passwords to different errors, and so they have to type in the specific password to override that save. So that's more than just an OK or cancel. I hope that helps a little bit with them thinking about things before they just go ahead and save. But who knows? It may just become reflexive to type a bunch of passwords until you get the one right.
You also did something too around shipping, where, if I recall correctly, don't you allow multiple open shipments on a single sales order?
We try to do something like that. What we ended up finding is Acumatica really restricted that. So what we ended up having to do is, because in our process we build servers, and with electronics can die. It's just part of the line of business. So if we're having to be doing a build and a part fails, we have to replace it. But there was an issue if, let's say, there are 4 parts on it originally, and you want to take one part off of shipment, and then you want to have a new shipment created for that. And actually, for us, if you hear me say pick tickets, it's because we've actually renamed shipments to pick tickets in our system. So what it does is it'll go and it'll look at the order. If, let's say, there's 4 parts, and we have to take one off the pick ticket, then it'll go back to that order. It'll then change the order so there's only 3 on that one line that's tied to the pick ticket, and then it'll split the extra one up to a second line, and then that second line will go on to a pick ticket, go on to a new pick ticket. So that's how we kind of overcome the issue with the open pick ticket. It's a limitation of Acumatica that we couldn't get around. So we had to do a little bit of creative coding with Acumatica on that one. I will say, when I get into the renaming of things, I don't know how many people use this, but there's a dictionary in Acumatica that you can just do a find and replace on words, and you can if your company has a naming convention. For us, it was pick tickets. We did a search in the Acumatica dictionary, and we found all the places that shipment. We replaced it with pick ticket, and now our system says pick ticket. So I
love that feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work at a previous company, and we had a facility in China that used a different ERP system, and we wanted to use one common ERP system, but the dumb technical limitation we ran into is everything in their database was stored in what's called a varchar. Acumatica stores everything with one extra letter, NVARCHAR, a different data type, that allows full Unicode. So that translation dictionary, you can either just relabel stuff into your language, or you could even translate it into a completely different language, including Chinese characters, because they're in the Unicode character set. And that's huge. I mean, it's a little technical thing, but it's huge from being able to implement as a global company, or, to your point, just relabel things to be more meaningful to what you call them. I love that feature.
Yeah, it's funny. We in our old system, we had certain things named a certain way, and we call them that way. And that's just because Everest called it that. It wasn't something that was actually in the industries out there. It was just Everest naming conventions. So we tried to kind of figure out better ways to name stuff in Acumatica when we went there.
Did you customize anything on the receiving side as well? Receiving on a purchase order?
Yeah, actually, here is a very interesting tool that we built on the receiving side of things. So we deal with thousands of serial numbers, and so and if you imagine there are tiny sticks of memory, and there may be one in a 14 character item code. There could be like one number that's different, makes it a different part. So we're receiving these, and we end up having to break out large lots that we buy. And so we needed a way to kind of allow us to do a couple things. One, do a lot of error checking on our receiving process to make sure that the parts matched. And a lot of times our serial numbers we use, there's a part numbers in the serial number. So we also wanted to double check to make sure that was a match. But then we needed it to be fast. And just the scanning, the way that the scanning was built into Acumatica on the receiving side just wasn't fast enough for us. So we built something where, these are one of those little tools in Acumatica that I love, the export and import that you can do on any document line in any of those grids. So we're on a purchase receipt. We export to Excel. We have a macro we built in Excel that actually talks to us. So our receiving team, they do a series of keystrokes, and they can start scanning in all the serial numbers. And if any of those things that we deem not correct happen, like the part of the scan, sometimes they're just scanning fast and they scan the same thing twice. It'll tell them duplicate scan. It'll tell them that the part number is not in the serial number. It'll tell them they scan too many. It'll scan too few. It does all those checks for us and lightning fast and scanning into Excel. And then we had someone build an import into our purchase receipts that would bring in all those serial numbers into the allocation for us. So
when you say talk to you, you actually mean audio comes out and says something.
Oh yeah. We found the visual base, the VBA code for Excel that would talk. So we have spoken commands. So we
I love hearing how Excel. I just love hearing how Excel gets inserted into processes in creative ways like that. Because you see these demos on stage at the Acumatica Summit where they do something cool with Amazon Alexa because it's leading technology, but you could do some really cool stuff from a real world process standpoint just using Excel like you just did. I just think that's hilarious. That's awesome.
I'll tell you, the combination of Excel and Acumatica allowed us to count, I think it was 75,000 serial numbers in a weekend. We started a full inventory count Friday night. We ran shifts. We ran a shift. We worked basically 16 hours a day in multiple shifts on Saturday and Sunday, and actually it went till probably 10 o'clock on Monday morning. We kind of were coming in and cleaning up some stuff, but we scanned in, I think it was 75,000 serial numbers, and we're able to then import them into Acumatica to do adjustments by using a combination of Excel. And actually, we used some experiences of it talking to us. So as we were scanning stuff, it would again tell us it was we didn't always have Acumatica in our Excel integration, so we still had some bad stock in, throughout, just old stuff that's been in our inventory. So it would alert us that, hey, this product had a part number not match the serial number, so we can catch those as we're doing our inventory count. And so we had all these count sheets that we then we imported into Acumatica. We did some Excel manipulation to find any write-offs. So any write-offs would happen. We actually did find stuff also that we thought was previously missing. So we also added stock, but we had Excel do all that calculation for us to find out what we needed to do the imports, and then we imported into Acumatica what the deltas were, and we're able to, again, do an inventory count of 75,000 serial numbers, physically scanning 75,000 serial numbers in a weekend. It was amazing.
That's awesome. And this, because you're talking about Excel, you're just talking about regular keyboard, USBs, or Bluetooth attached to a computer. We're not talking about the mobile app or anything like that, right?
Correct. Just we would pull out bins, bring them to counting stations. We had 10 counting stations going on throughout the warehouse, and then people would scan those in, and we had people running bins out to the counting stations, running them back to the bins where they're supposed to be, and then we had people at the counting stations doing counting. So, yeah.
I love that example of, to your point earlier about looking at the process and doing something that dramatically improves the process without not even necessarily introducing quote, quote, modern technology, old school scanner and old school Excel, but dramatically improving the process. That's a great example of that. I love that.
Yeah, what you mentioned about just looking at the process, it's something that we try and do all the time. Something that I give you a couple quick stories. When we talk about trying not to do customizations in Acumatica, if you can avoid it, there are a lot of things you can configure in Acumatica. A lot of things they give you. You have automation steps, you have business events, you have generic inquiries, a lot of stuff that's already built within the system. So we try and leverage that. We recently had an issue where on our pick tickets, we also call shipments, we had a scenario where we had accounting who needed to update inventory on shipments under certain scenarios. We had our warehouse needing to do it in other certain scenarios, but only when it's only when it's on a receipt. So we're doing an RMA and we're doing a receipt shipment. They need to go to update IN to receive it into stock. But we're having issues where they would accidentally, because they'd be in the actions menu, they may accidentally click update IN on a non-receipt. That's giving us problems because then that locked the shipment and you couldn't do anything with it. And so again, I talked about earlier how we'd find mistakes and have to do corrections on things, and that would screw up the order because it would lock everything for us. So we looked at the process and we said, okay, what can we do? And we were first looking at customizations and okay, how do we customize the code and look for the user and look for the group they're in, or the role they're in, and try and figure out a bunch of stuff. And then we started just kind of, okay, let's break this down into the actual processes that we're looking at. Okay, we have one group who needs access to a button, and we have another group that needs access to a button. And then we said, you know what? Why don't we just make two buttons, which you can do in automation steps of Acumatica. You can make a new button, have it all the same properties, just call it something else. So then we created a new button, and we use automation steps to hide that button unless it's a receipt. So that was the button that people use to update INs for receipts. So then that gave us control of that button, so it would only show up when needed. Then the normal update IN button, we used security permissions to control it only available to accounting. So that way the other team never clicked on it because they didn't have the security rights to do that. So we're able to do what we wanted to accomplish as far as the business rules go without having to actually customize a single thing. It was just configured within Acumatica. So we're really excited to be able to kind of, okay, look, you're doing all this. And the other great thing about not customizing is you don't have to interrupt the day and try and publish something and kick everybody out of Acumatica. All that was just done just on the fly, and it worked with security permissions and doing automation steps. Another area that we look at Acumatica, we talk about how serial numbers, user-defined serial numbers, is kind of the last thing that ends up happening. With any system, the last thing that gets updated are vendor returns, because there's no money in vendor returns. So no one really makes that process great. Sales is always the first thing that gets updated. So we looked at Acumatica, the vendor return process, we needed to work with our functions. So we broke it down into the processes that we have. We said, okay, look, we need one group to accept vendor return. We need that return to then get pushed to another group because the warehouse would identify a problem that needs to get returned to the vendor. That it would then give the purchasing team, they would have to negotiate with the vendor to accept the return and figure out if they're going to replace it or what they're going to do with it. And then once all that was finalized, it needed to go back to the vendor, so go back to the warehouse to get shipped to the vendor. And then finally, accounting would need to get a hold of it once it's gotten to the vendor to go ahead and do any applying of funds from the vendor return, the purchase receipt return. So we had all these groups who needed kind of that workflow. And so we said, okay, let's look at the purchase receipts. Okay, let's create, again, no customizations. We just wanted to create workflows with tabs. So we did filters on generic inquiry. So we created that. And the first step we did was then put those into a dashboard so we could then see the process on the screen. We said, okay, look, now that we have that, let's start automating stuff. So we figured, okay, how do we have automatic emails go out to people? So we created the business events based off of those tabs and the triggering emails to certain groups. So then we could actually, those groups would know when it went to each of the different areas. And then we said, okay, now how do we actually get things back to the warehouse? We had customized a email address for pick tickets early on, so that if we emailed a PDF to a certain email address, then it would print out to our printer. So we leveraged that same technology.
That's a clever way of having Acumatica talk directly to a printer. I like that, without even using the device hub, huh? Oh, interesting.
Because before Device Hub, there was no option. So we done email address. We send a PDF that prints to our pick ticket printer. So we said, okay, look, we can do that for vendors.
Is there a tool you use to have the email talk to the printer, or is it something you wrote yourself?
I will get it to you. Our head of IT did that,
Cool.
It could easily just be an exchange thing he did.
Really cool. Okay.
But we'll add it to the audio blog notes here. So we did the same thing with vendor returns. So we had the barcode. We had a barcode label that printed on the vendor return on the purchase receipt. We sent that to the pick ticket printer. It printed out just like a pick ticket, but it was a vendor return, and the pickers knew to go to the warehouse location for vendor returns and grab it and ship it out. And then we have our FedEx machine. The FedEx actually, they maintain a machine for us for doing FedEx, and we just have a SQL view. Again, we have it on premise so that we can leverage that with this FedEx Ship Manager. It reads a SQL view, and we edited that SQL view to also include vendor returns. So now FedEx, the shipper takes the quote unquote pick ticket for vendor returns to the FedEx machine, scans the barcode, it brings up exactly where it's supposed to go. And then we also, early on, we discovered that what's it called now, where you can do like updates, have Acumatica do updates for you or do inserts into the records.
You're not talking about the APIs.
Not the APIs. But they're used a lot of you want to start with the
import scenarios.
Yeah, import scenarios. Thank you. Can't believe I've drew a blank on that. We use these all the time. So import scenarios are like the poor man's API. So,
I totally agree. Poor man's API, exactly.
Yeah. So we then take that FedEx and we use an import scenario that takes it from the another great thing with Acumatica is that you can take any of your own SQL and create data access classes based on that. So we just expose that, and then we're able to also see that, and then also just we're able to do import scenarios to bring it from that into update the vendor return with into a custom field for the tracking number. So that kind of completed our whole process. And so just kind of taking things and saying, okay, what's the actual process, splitting out into how we want to handle things, and then figuring out ways in which we can configure Acumatica at first before we do anything else. So in this, really, what was customized, if you want to say that, is a custom field on the purchase receipt for receipts, and then I think it was exposing a data access class from SQL View. That was the extent of our customization. We were kind of moving our own process with just really configuring of Acumatica.
I love that you went into all those specific workflow examples, and I'm sure you didn't cover all of them. Maybe we could even I'd love to do another audio post with you to keep going on these, because these specific examples, any one of them could resonate with someone. I think it's great. And I love it for two reasons. One is that you said in the beginning that it only took you a couple hours to upgrade. And you just showed us that you did a bunch of stuff, and even stuff we didn't talk about, and yet it still only takes you a couple hours to upgrade. That's huge. And secondly, it seems to me like you're in an industry where efficiency is critical. I mean, you're reselling in many cases hardware. I mean, the margins can't be that great on hardware, and your efficiency seems to me like it's not like you're giving away your secret sauce. You're telling us a lot of specific examples, but really, to me, your secret sauce in your industry is your ability to continue to innovate and to continue to improve your processes. And of course, that's just your people and how you approach things, right? So that's very interesting to me, those specific examples.
Yeah, we try and do it quarterly, meetings with teams to kind of talk through processes and figure out ways that we can kind of improve efficiencies. And just recently, that vendor return one came about from a quarterly meeting where we're talking to teams, and like, yeah, this is just it's a very kludgy process, and it wasn't a good flow.
I love it. And what a great example, too, of how an ERP implementation, in a sense, is never done. You always want to be revisiting things and improving them. And it sounds like you've really achieved that culture there at Expite.
It's hard because you have people that you're then changing stuff on them every quarter. So you have to remind them a lot of times about things that were done, because they get so used to their ways and they kind of forget that you did something really cool for them. So it takes a lot of reminders, but it's worth it in the end.
So it sounds like you never just achieve a culture that automatically continues to innovate. It's always like pushing a rock uphill. Is that what I'm hearing in your experience?
Yes. I mean,
it's like working out. You always have to get to the gym. You always have to it never just happens automatically.
I mean, I would say unless you're in, let's say, a software development or some kind of in an engineering or development phase, where part of the culture has to be to innovate, and kind of you get people who are on board because of the fact that they can innovate, and kind of that's in their mindset. When you're in an environment where you have people who are dedicated to the company and doing hard work in a warehouse, or doing great work doing sales stuff for people, or doing accounting stuff, those are just more your traditional roles. We get those people because they're really good at those roles. They can innovate, but again, they do it a little more some of the rock, but they kind of have to get on board because we change a lot and we're adapting, and we change our processes. We have ideas for better or for worse every week on things. So I laugh sometimes that we would look back at things we've done and we're like, oh, yeah, I forgot we did that. Okay, hey guys, we already have this done. So
it comes full circle sometimes, huh?
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, look at this. This is really cool. Look what we did a year ago. This is really cool. It does this.
That's a big reason what motivates me to do blogging and participate in AUG forums is exactly that. Like, I read this, or I wrote this a couple of years ago. I forgot about it. If you write it down, if you document it, then you can educate yourself in the future.
Yeah. Man, there's a brilliant person who wrote this. That was me.
I'm curious your take. I'll let you go in a couple more minutes here, but your take on how you achieve that, and maybe it's not a culture that runs automatically, but how you get momentum on being a company in an industry, not software development, but in industry that continues to innovate their back office processes. I'm curious your take. What percentage of that, if you were to break it down, is it 50-50, 60-40, is the carrot versus the stick with your people internally as being the CEO?
Nearly all carrot. The way it works is that you've got to listen. So it's not a matter of just, and it's not just the listening piece of it. So you've got to be able to have a culture where even as a CEO, I'll go and I'll sit amongst teams and I'll listen to what they're doing, and I'll hear firsthand. I'm part of all of our quarterly meetings with the dev team to understand the business processes, that kind of thing, and so listening to them, but then it's acting on them. So you get the buy-in a lot easier if you actually listen to what they're saying and act upon it. If you just listen and take notes and nothing ever happens, then you don't get that same buy-in. If you just act and don't listen and you kind of do things in a bubble and push stuff out, you also don't get the buy-in because it wasn't their idea. So you've got to have both phases of that, and it helps. And then there's still some of that rock where it's not necessarily the stick, because I mean, a stick as much as, hey, it's just happening. I mean, you're either on the bus or off the bus, but we are innovating. But that's the only stick we really use on that side of things.
I love hearing that. I have the same philosophy. I mean, in that I don't think people change unless they want to change. And you have some people who come in like a bull in a china shop, saying they are change agents, and they can achieve some short-term results, but having a long-term culture change, I don't know how you do that with the stick. The carrot is so critical. There's actually a guy named Ben Graham that I went to a process improvement workshop, and he actually has a doctorate degree. I believe it's in something like organizational psychology, something like that. And he would actually do nothing but process improvement projects. And first thing to do was document them. Then you look at how you can improve them. But he would only do it with companies, and a lot of it was government agencies and larger companies. He would only do it if the leadership agreed not to let anyone go. So if you were able to eliminate a role, you were not allowed to eliminate the person. You had to put them in another role, because he believed very strongly in exactly that. It was the carrot. The worker themselves is the only ones who can really innovate it, because they're doing the work. And so you have to motivate them to do that. You can't just beat them over the head with a stick. So I'm really happy to hear that your experience is the same. That's how you achieve that kind of a culture.
That's interesting about the automation of things and business process, keeping the jobs. It's actually very timely, because that's a discussion that's going on in politics right now, and probably shouldn't get into politics on this, but about automation, and is that going to harm jobs? Is that really a job killer? It's really interesting to hear, hey, do that, but then keep the people, is a good way to kind of do things.
Well, and this whole virus thing has accelerated that, right? It seems to me like everyone is relooking at their process because they had to. They have to figure out how to do things from home now. And I think that whole getting replaced with machines potentially is going to be accelerated. There's going to be a permanent impact that this had on everyone because they were forced into reconsidering their processes, right?
Well, the other, again, we're kind of going off on some tangents here. The other thing to look out for is that as companies have been forced to kind of squeeze themselves because of the economy, they may realize, hey, look, we can actually, if it's a process change, if it's a people change, if it's a whatever change, we can do the same levels with less people. And they're able to just kind of figure out how to do that. And then that hurts jobs because, or helps bottom line, but it hurts those jobs in particular. And the people who will survive all this in the economy, the similar things happening in the IT space, but it's those people who are open to the innovations and are looking to constantly improve themselves. We've seen this in the IT space where a lot of people are scared of, let's say, virtualization or any of these adapting new technologies because they're afraid it's going to take over their job. And whether people know or not, things will take over jobs, and you just have to be kind of in there to say, hey, look, how am I going to be better or do something different or bring value to the company so that it doesn't matter if a process gets changed. I'm still adding value somewhere.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, I love it. I think, Ryan, we'll probably wrap it up here for the sake of time. I'd love to do this again with you. I feel like we have a lot more we could talk about, even specific examples you're working on, future projects, how you're using Acumatica or looking to use Acumatica in future ways. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
All right. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next AUG blog audio post. Take care.